Whew, I don't know if I'll be able to come to like a second one. I know that there's supposed to be like 2 new moons this month.
Oh, well, so here, I can share my screen real quick. Oh, let me get it up. I can show you this schedule.
Okay.
It's easier to show it than type it because I'm being a little lazy. You see the screen?
Mm-hmm.
So the 9th and the 16th are the next 2 ones, and they're on Fridays.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's on Saturday, the 17th, 24th, and 31st for a little while. It has to do with a couple things. One, when the new moon is.
Right.
But then also it has to do with when the day starts. Because the actual full zero conjunction has to happen before the day starts for it to be counted as a new moon day. At least that's how I believe it. Different people believe differently on this, and it's really hard to find. I don't know any scriptures that actually completely teach what I believe. And I've asked around, no one knows them. I know that moon in Hebrew has to do with the word that its root has to be with rebuilt, meaning and the way I take it is that the new moon is rebuilding at new moon. There are a few people that think the new moon is the full moon, which I disagree with. But anyways.
Well, I suppose it would depend on the context of, is it rebuilt, past tense, or is it rebuilding?
Sure.
Present.
Psalms, is it Psalms 84? If I remember, I'd have to go look it up. Is a key verse for these types of arguments, and both sides of the argument actually use it. Let me see if that's it, and if it is, we can look at it together and we can talk about the issue a little bit.
Yeah. But I don't know why today is a little more tired than others.
I go back and forth myself at times. I'm doing okay right now. Yesterday I stayed up to 4 working on my current blog post. I'm not seeing it real quick. Let me look at my notes. I don't know if this is what you want to talk about. This is if you're not worried about lunar Sabbaths yourself, it's kind of a technical detail that it's just like, unless you like really believe it, like who cares?
Well, I would like to know some of the more technical bits of it,
Sure. All right. Yeah, I'm just trying. Oh, it's Psalms 81. I was close. I was off a couple chapters. Sorry about that. Okay. Well, let me share my screen.
What, nummies? What? What did you catch? Oh, you didn't catch anything. Sometimes he'll like meow at me in order to announce it.
Bring you dead rats as presents.
He's actually a good boy. He'll actually kill it before he brings it in. The other one brings them in and lets them go, and I get infestations. It's like, what are you thinking?
They're doing so cats. They're just when they bring you dead animals, they're just or other things. They're doing what they would do if you were their cat leader, because they think you're a cat. They just don't know anymore.
Right. They know that because you're bald and a little gangly, that you just need, you're just a little helpless kitten that needs some help.
Yeah. Oh, all right. Well, here's this verse that actually both sides of the argument use. So it's funny, but part of the problem is bad translations. And, you know, the LDS Church uses the King James Version, right? And it's not the best translation, but it's the one that I generally use because it's what I grew up with, right, in the church. But I can tell you, this one's a bad translation. But let's look at what it says here. So blow the trumpet, and I would say shofar. I have a shofar. But in the new moon. So when there's a new moon, you're supposed to blow the shofar. As in, it's a part of the way that the priests proclaim the new moon. In fact, one thing that just happened was Feast of Trumpets, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a phrase in the Old Testament that a lot of Christians don't understand because they don't look at the Hebrew roots of the words and the phrases and the culture of Yeshua, who was a Jew, right? He was a Hebrew. But no man shall know the day nor the hour. That is a Hebrew idiom for Feast of Trumpets, because it is the holiday. You know, it's a holiday. You don't know when it's happening until right when the horn is blown and the new moon is pronounced, because it is the only Jewish holiday. It's on the first day of the moon or month, because month, when you see month in the scriptures, it actually is moon. It's just, there's translation's a tricky business, right? For one, if you don't know the culture that it's in there, and two, there's not always a one-to-one relation on words. So, but the translators, most modern translators, translate moon into month because of the culture. Because
Is the coming, I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, that's fine.
Is the coming supposed to be announced by a trumpet?
It's going to be announced, yes, is a simple answer. I also believe it'll be announced by other things, but there will be noises being done. I think I know, I don't know how much you believe it, but I know you know of Anthony Larson's work.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
So,
I'll tell you, that was an interesting conversion of mind.
I don't know what you mean by conversion.
Well, let's put it this way. I kind of came into this oddly through, have you ever heard of Zachariah Sitchin?
The name somewhat sounds familiar, but I don't know how off the top of my head.
So he was a big proponent about this additional, like, 10th planet, Nibiru.
So I do believe there is another planet coming back, right? Even Joseph Smith has a quote on that, right?
Right.
But I personally believe it's Mars.
Well,
But anyway.
this is, this guy, so like Velikovsky, this guy is a linguist, who happened to, this is the irony here. Both Velikovsky and Sitchin are Russian Jews who are linguists.
Okay.
And it was it was looking at historical records, reading them from a different linguistic filter, I guess you could say, that caused them to go, aha. Anyway, when I was in my late teens, early 20s, I discovered I so I got into this path of paganism when I was in my teens as a rebellion to Mormonism.
Oh, okay.
And um, while I was at the magic shop, the bookshop, I came across this book called Genesis Revisited by Zechariah Sitchin. And it was a look at pre-biblical Sumerian mythologies that really echoed um, the biblical Genesis narrative, but it was a fleshed out version rather than a bullet point, or a Cliff Notes version. Genesis is basically a Cliff Notes version of um, this Sumerian mythology.
I'm aware of that theory. I understand where it's coming from, but I do believe Genesis actually did happen, and that all cultures actually have some form of Genesis in their culture, including the flood.
Well,
But
I'm just telling you
sure, all right,
how you got into it. I do not dispute what you just said. There's plenty of parallel,
sure, yeah, right,
history that is in the mythologies all around the world. That yeah, you're right. I'm just anyway. So I got into Sitchin's stuff because I really the it does make sense that before the flood there was at least a group. I don't know if they were extraterrestrial. I don't know if they, I don't know, but
Hmm.
there was a level of understanding and knowledge that surpasses our current day
Oh yeah.
wisdom.
I believe God gave us, or Adam, or the ancients before Noah, a lot more information and knowledge than we have now. I mean, archaeology shows that, right? And a lot of people's answers is that, well, they got it from aliens instead of God. I mean, you know why there's at the Pyramid of Giza, why it's flat, right? Because there's a spaceship that's going to land there to save the human race, right? Don't you know that?
No, I never heard that.
Oh, you haven't heard that? Oh
No, I never
man,
heard that. No.
I before I woke up, I was a little bit into New Age, lack of didn't know where
Oh,
else to look, and
yeah, you were kind of
right.
floating where I was.
And I knew something was off. I just didn't know where to look. And I went there not knowing any better. But anyways, some of the
Uh,
stuff there is cuckoo. I'll leave it at that.
yeah. Well, so I got into this stuff, and um, so before that, rewind the way back machine here. My father, who was a convert to he was raised Catholic, he converted to the church, married my mom. Um, he's always been a very um, faithful, fanatic kind of person.
Okay.
Um, he basically chased himself out of the church because um, he realized that the modern church was an apostasy.
Oh,
And
sure. I mean, he found that out long before I did, but I mean, he's
uh,
older than me too,
he
right?
found this out he found this out just a little after I was born, type of thing.
Oh,
Uh,
sure.
but yeah, so he went on his own wild quest to find the truth, within the structure of what he understood with Joseph Smith and stuff.
Sure.
And he was the one that actually found Larson, that he found the books by Larson.
Oh, yeah,
back in
they
the day.
were hot sellers in Desert Book for a long time.
Yeah. And so I didn't have contact with him until I was 25. So
Larson or your dad?
my dad, my father.
Oh, okay.
So my father and my mother. So my father got pretty radical in his pursuit of trying to live the law and what he understood. And now he has some different understandings than you do of what
Sure, sure,
Joseph
that's
Smith.
fine. I'm just wondering what law, as in Torah.
Uh, Basically polygamy and crap like that.
Okay, all right. So Brigham
So
Young teachings,
yeah,
as I would put it.
he would have had he had some different understandings of what
Sure,
you know.
sure. It sounds like maybe he was trying to do what he thought was true, and he was in deceived.
Right. And my mother, she married this knowing how kind of off the wall he was, but I I I think she was kind of delusional. She was like, oh, he'll become normal. Oh, he'll, maybe I can tame him.
I
Oh,
can fix them. I know a lot of women think that.
yeah, well, she realized that she couldn't fix him and instead decided to be scared, to scare the shit out of herself. And in a lot of ways, I do not blame her. But, this was back this was over 40 years ago, right? This was when you were taking the chances of your not just yourself, but your family, your kids into your own hands. If you decided to leave the crazy spouse. And so she divorced him, she left him, and um, she made a choice of deciding to try to trust him, even though she had had it in the like I was 2.5 when they divorced, and they the a court arrangement was that he was to have supervised visitation, and he talked her into letting him have a few more hours for visitation, and he used that couple of hours much to his advantage by whisking me off to a eastern state um, to go and stay with his mother. So, my mother managed to
So
get me
he
back,
kidnapped
but
you basically, at least
yeah,
legally, right?
yeah.
You have the
So he
right.
kidnapped me, and then my mother turned around and, with the help of the church, actually managed to. So there was a couple of church members who, in the state, you know, um, distracted him while she grabbed me and managed to get me to the airport. But anyway, long story short, after dual kidnappings, it's fair to say that,
I guess you could. Yeah, I guess they both did kind of kidnap because they were
yeah,
both
I
parents, right?
mean, shit,
I mean, the law
I
wouldn't see it that way, right? The law would
no.
only see your mom recovering and your dad's
Well,
kidnapping custody
if my
issues. But
dad had filed, the thing is that the ruling in one state didn't actually apply in another state. So my father could have easily, if he had played his cards,
uh,
he
uh,
could have done something to, anyway. Um, the short of it was, I wasn't, I didn't see him again until I was like 25.
so did he find out about the FLDS then? Because if he wanted to go
He
polygamy,
didn't
they
get into
were
the
big into that.
FLDS. He didn't think that they were. He thought they were apostate too, but
Oh, they are, but um,
he.
I think all LDS breakoffs are apostate, to be honest, but because
But the
they follow Brigham Young, not Joseph Smith, but that's a whole other story. But
right.
I do think, though, that a lot of them who do that are doing it because they thought Joseph Smith taught it, though, because that's
Right.
what they were
That's what
taught
they were
going
told.
on. So I know one lady that I completely disagree with. She thinks the only reason any man does polygamy is because he's just horny. Now, I do believe Brigham Young was that way, but I do think there are some honest men that just do it. Either one, because their wife told them to, like Abraham,
Hmm.
or tricked into it, like Jacob,
Hmm.
or they were deceived, like a lot of people in the Restoration, because of Brigham Young's lies.
Well, I mean, yeah, you're right. There is a lot of men and women who genuinely go into these relationships because they truly believe that that is for their salvation or their exaltation, I guess is the better term. And it's not to say that they don't love each other or things like that, but it's not.
Yeah,
No.
they're just. I mean, I've been deceived on things, and I've had to unlearn. And
Yeah.
I partly have benefited from what other people have done, and so I
Right.
don't fault them for doing the best that they have with what,
Right.
or what, it didn't come out the best. I don't fault them for them trying to do the best with what they had.
Right.
Now,
God
I
doesn't.
would say that the Book of Mormon only condemns polygamy, period. Um, but it, it, it is a very sticky subject, that's for sure. And I think there's a lot of
Right.
honest people that are doing it because they're deceived, not because they're carnal.
Right. I agree with you. Um, anyway, so when I got back in contact with my father, um, so I was steeped in all this paganism stuff and aliens, ancient aliens,
Oh,
and
I have a good video debunking ancient aliens if you want it.
oh, yeah, I've spent the last 30-ish years of my life somewhere on that board. I'm fine.
Oh, okay.
Um,
All right.
um,
Well, my
I
new age group that I used to meet with before I knew better, they believed in aliens, and they were talking about, I forget the guy's name, but with the big funny hair, right? He's just I always say he's just a,
Oh, I don't remember his name, but he looks like an Einstein. Looks like
yeah,
Einstein had a relationship with like a Polynesian or something.
yeah, that's him. But I think he's a deliberate deceiver.
Mm.
He knows that what he's saying is lies. Hold on. Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
tell her sorry.
It's fine.
Anyway, so I was talking with my father when I first, oh my goodness, that man, even if some of his information is not necessarily true, it is, he goes right off the high dive, right into the deep end.
for
He
sure.
is, I mean, he would have the journal, he had like the Journal
Journal
of Discourses. He
discourses.
had
Yeah.
I mean, he had,
I don't look at journal discourses. It's a whole bunch of,
I know, I'm just
but
saying,
sure. He was into it.
he was,
He didn't just have his opinion. He had researched what he believed
oh yeah,
into the sources that he thought were authentic and
right,
trustworthy.
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, that man, I'm pretty sure I got a lot of I'm not the smartest person in the world, but I'm pretty there. And I got most of my,
You're number two, right?
maybe number three,
Oh, okay.
a little bit of, humility.
Are you prideful of your
Oh my
humility?
gosh, yes. Yes. I mean, one of the worst insults that were ever given to me was a guy that I was dating a long time ago. Comes into my room. I have this huge bookshelf. It's like probably an 8 shelf, huge bookshelf that I could actually use. It could double as a wall, by itself. It was that big. It was huge. And I only, and I love books, and I did not even have a chance to fill it. Living under the poverty line, you don't really get a chance to fill,
For sure.
that kind of a bookshelf. It was only maybe a third full, maybe at that. And he comes in, he looks at it, and he's like, "Oh, you have too many books." What? I mean, talk about an insult.
I nowadays I still like physical books for some things, but overall I like Kindles more, mainly just because they're portable
Right.
and
I've
and
actually,
searchable.
yeah, I've had to go to like audiobooks if I want to actually read the book, because I have a hard time anymore just being able to sit for hours at a time just to get the book read.
Oh,
But
well,
I
I
dig that.
time-wise, I like Audible too because I can do it like when I'm watching my youngest. Like my youngest, he likes to go for walks right now.
Hmm.
I just listen to an audiobook while I take him for a walk. Or
Yeah,
when my
there you
mom
go.
or when my wife wants me to help with a chore, I said, Mom, that was bad. uh,
Well,
you know what? I listen to an audiobook while I'm doing what she asked me to
yeah,
do.
exactly. I mean, wash the dishes while gaining enlightenment.
Oh yeah,
But yeah, so we talked, and I mentioned Nibiru to him.
mhm.
I was the faithful believer in this planet Nibiru. And he was like, "You're wrong." I'm like, "What?" "Oh, that was Saturn, and it was it was the polar sun." And he was like telling me all about it, and I was like, I I recounted it to my friend who was also one of those, ancient alien believers. I
Oh,
recounted the story after he had told it to me, and I laughed so hard because it was like, I I don't think I could have laughed any harder unless he had told me the earth was flat.
oh, you know what I find crazy?
Mm,
There's people who say they believe in the Book of Mormon
hmm.
and they believe the earth is flat. But yet there's verses in Helaman that completely destroy that.
Well, people say they believe in the Bible and that the earth is flat, but what
That's
can I
true.
say?
That I people say they believe in science and say the earth is flat.
Well, which science are you talking about? Anyway,
Yeah,
um,
that's a good point there.
but yeah, so he told me this theory, and I just didn't buy it for the longest time. But then, like some years later, I
So
think this
he
was,
was telling you about the polar configuration, it sounds like.
yeah, he was telling me about the polar configuration and stuff. Um, and this was like years before, just probably, no, was it years before? No, it wasn't years before. I I learned about it just before I got married.
I
He
learned about
said,
it in 2014.
"Oh, well, I got married in 2001, so
So you know about it a lot longer than I have.
right." Um, but I I knew about it, but I did not believe it. It was just absolute horse hockey to me at the time with my understanding.
Sure.
And I'm not quite sure how, but my my understanding, it was like Legos being taken apart. It was like I was literally being taken apart and being rebuilt. That's kind of what it feels like, because I don't know why I finally I mean, it wasn't until after I was married that I finally picked up the first book, um,
Oh, of Anthony's trilogy.
yeah, of Anthony's trilogy. And I read it. I mean, this was like some years after I was married. So I found out about it just before I got married and laughed at it for years,
Sure.
probably a good handful of years. But then I read
Oh,
it.
it completely goes against what's taught in mainstream.
Oh, no kidding. I mean, it puts gravity on its ear. It puts the concept of uniform. What is it? Uniformitarianism.
Uniformitism on,
Yeah, that
yeah.
one word that I can't say.
Joseph Smith was against that also. But
Right.
the historians can't make sense of a lot of the statements that go along with this, and or they believe in uniformitism. That's a big word. And
Yes,
so
it
they
is.
just completely ignore it because he would, I forget what's the opposite of that, but
Catastrophism.
yeah, that word. That's what Joseph Smith was, and that's what I am, even though
Right.
I can't say it.
But yeah, it wasn't until, oh, it must have been, it was probably about 10 years or just a little more before I finally had that moment where I don't even remember what prompted me, but I ended up reading the book, becoming, and just obsessed with it. I even took it to one of the book clubs, and I went and
That's
obtained all
cool.
these extra copies so that I could share it with the book club. That it was like, it wasn't
That's cool.
quite, so it wasn't a Mormon official book club, but it was like
Mostly
99%,
Mormons in it.
mostly, yeah, it was 99% women from the ward,
Sure.
or had been in the ward, and they just joined the group, and there was like, anyway, so we read it, and they were like, that was nice, moving on.
Okay.
I'm like, okay,
I
that's your choice.
I so with the group I used to meet with was kind of New Ager stuff.
Uh-huh.
He, one guy introduced me to the Thunderbolts project, and I kind of liked it, but I didn't put a
Mhm.
lot of focus in it at the time. But then my home teacher introduced me to Anthony, which is probably the best thing that the home teacher did because
Mhm.
he was not nice to me later, but anyways, um, he introduced me to Anthony's work, and I ate it up. I loved it. I
Oh
don't
yeah.
agree with everything that Anthony says, but the
Right.
general theory I completely agree with. In fact,
Right.
I agreed with it so much that after I took all his lessons, I'm like, all right, let me host lectures to help get other people interested. Partly because I wanted more, and partly I want to get other people to believe it too.
Yeah. But yeah, I never met Mr. Larson in person, but I did have a few private chats with him over Facebook,
Hmm.
and yeah, he he was a good guy.
In general,
I
he's a
like him.
very nice guy. In general,
And it really, I think he knew when he made that last lecture, entitled it The Last Lecture, and then people were like,
but
are you dying? He's like, no, but this could be the last. I think he knew. I think he knew. And he just didn't want to, I mean, he labeled
oh, I
it.
knew that he was running out of time.
Yeah. I
Sure.
mean, it wasn't even a year later that it was like, what, 6 months? Within 6 months of that, he passed away.
I don't
I think.
know on the timing because we weren't on the best terms at that time. But I do
Yeah.
remember when he died, it was around Feast of Trumpets, and I did when I could because I was busy doing other things. I did my red carpets post somewhat in his honor, and I even said I wonder if he asked if he could die on a on
Holiday.
on the Feast of Trumpets because it's the roaring. So I believe one thing, kind of circling back a little bit, is when the
Hmm.
planet comes, it's going to make a trumpet like sound. But
Yeah.
I wonder if he asked, can I go on one of these planet days or high holidays, right? But anyways, um, it was a little nice little post on it. But then Mark, him and
Oh,
his Mark Penwell, I think, or something
I
like
think
that. I
it's
forget his,
Penell, I
the
think.
one that took over his Anthony's group when he died,
Right.
right? Mark, whatever. But he wouldn't let people post that article in the group,
Uh,
and that caused a controversy. Then I wrote about it. But anyways,
okay. But
uh,
yeah, so I ended up, it was probably, oh geez, probably around 2011, 2012, right in that area. 20 between 2011 and 2014, 2013 was when I actually got into the Electric Universe stuff through Larson, and then finding out from Larson that there was more to it, and then from Larson to Velikovsky, from Velikovsky to the
yeah,
ThunderBolts project.
I don't spend a lot of time there anymore, partly because every group that I've been in, when they learn some of my other beliefs, they kick me out. So I don't have anybody to share the stuff with. I have some things to write about. I just don't focus on it because it's I don't have anybody to share with because everybody kicks me out of these groups. And so I focus on other things. Like I remember, this is one thing if I ever wanted to spend time on this subject, there's a post I want to write about whose planet is it anyways, and bringing out points how Venus is Satan's planet and Mars is Yeshua's planet. In fact, the other day, this is crazy, when I was walking my youngest around in the stroller, putting him to sleep. This is,
Mhm.
I mean, we could talk about points on this, but here's just a recent one that I think that goes along with it. Someone had one of their pagan blue goddesses on their doors, and I just started thinking about it. But anyways, when our
Faith.
blood, yeah, this my mind wanders and makes these weird connections
You're
at times.
talking
But
about the Mary Queen of Heaven, like icons.
I don't
The
know. It
blue.
was a new age, probably. I don't remember enough on that, but I I was thinking about this, because I before I saw that, and this was maybe last 3 weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, that
Mhm.
I'd already come to the conclusion that Venus is Satan's planet and Mars is Yeshua's planet. But anyways, Venus is blue, Mars is red, right?
Okay.
And I was thinking about this air, right? When you have clean air that binds to the blood, it's red. When you have dirty air, it's blue.
Oh, the CO2.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, that may be a stretch, right? But it's an interesting correlation.
Well, it is. I mean, so one thing that I've had to come to peace with is that I am, in fact, a scriptural literalist. Just
Well, there's
not
time that's
a,
literal and there's time that's symbolic, and you have to use
well,
judgment to
what
know
I mean
when.
is, so there's literal, but there's different layers of.
Oh, yeah, I
Well,
agree. There's PaRDeS. Have I told you about PaRDeS before?
no, I don't think so.
Here, I'll give you a link real quick. You, it just kind of gets you started on the subject, but if you believe this, and it sounds like you do, you may like this. Let me give it to you real quick. There you go. You'll probably like that. There are levels. Sorry about the URL forwarder Facebook doesn't. Facebook
Oh,
censors.
you sent it to Facebook. In that
Oh,
case,
I can put it here because.
fine. It's just as well. It don't no. Go ahead. I'll check out Facebook in a minute. But yeah. So being oh he did anyway. So being a scriptural literalist, um, it's like I see that there's a connection for like the coronavirus and being in Revelation, because of the appearance of a crown. The coronavirus was named coronavirus because it had these crown-like
Sure.
protrusions.
Yeah.
And, while it may not literally be on a horse, it literally has a crown. So,
Sure. Well, one thing about that I think is you may have to rethink about. It's been more than 5 moons
that's true.
that is down on
But
lockdown.
I think a lot of
But I do, and I need to just do a little more research, and I do like how you brought out how the scorpions are like vaccines. I haven't
well,
put effort into that, but
not
initially I think that
necessarily,
makes sense.
not necessarily vaccines, but the coronavirus, unlike other coronaviruses, is actually a virus that attacks heart integrity, cardio integrity, and it affects blood. And it's not just a respiratory disease like normal coronavirus, you know. And the most people, except for the very faithful, and when I say faithful, I mean that they've been converted to. Are you still there?
Yeah, can you?
Okay, because you were holding still for a second. I was like,
I was trying to pay attention to you.
but when I say faithful, I mean that people have literally been converted to the cult of Corona. It's like a death cult.
I didn't know there was a cult Corona, but I'm not surprised.
It's not official. It's not a literal thing, but people who freak their shit if you don't wear a mask. People
Oh,
who,
okay, sure. Right.
these people, they're
They
extremely
bought into
moral.
the lie to where their life depends on it.
I mean, if you want to put it that way, but think about it. They bought into the morality of wearing a mask. They bought into, they are true believers,
Oh yeah,
and
I've seen some videos of people beating up those who don't. In fact, right, getting into their face. Am I like, so if you really, if this just shows how they're not really thinking it through, even though they're believing it, right? Even how they're trying to take care of it. If you really believe that he may be a problem, why are you getting close to him in the first place?
well,
Anyway.
their talisman, their talisman's going to protect them
Then why do I need one?
because it shows how moral you are. It shows that you actually care for other people besides yourself. It is a symbol of your faith.
I guess I could see how maybe they believe that. I think it's naive,
Now,
but
yeah,
I can see how some people would think that. But you should not, no matter what you believe, force other people to believe the way you do. You
you're right.
you can convince them or tell them why you believe that way and try to convince them of it, but you can't
Right,
force people to believe the
right.
same.
Well, I mean, there is some, um, there is some belief, I consider this, maybe I'm wrong, but I consider a lot of this secular Islamism, where you are expected to submit, which is what Islam means, to submit
Mm-hmm.
to the morality, to the modesty, to the faith.
Well,
And
on that point, they have their own problems. I mean, they were covered, the women were covered, and they still got it. And I believe the Catholic Church created Islam to go against the Protestants. I can give you a video on it. I have a couple of resources on that.
I'm curious. So, but yeah, the possibility of this being a secular Islam and the conversion of the world, it sits right in line with a lot of the Islamic traditions of end times. And, um, this corona thing it meshes. If you look at it in the levels of literalness, it fits Genesis 3:6 and chapter 9 very well.
Hold on, I don't have those memorized. I want to go look at those up. Genesis 3:6.
3, so it's chapter 3, verse 6.
Yeah, and the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and then it was pleasant to the eyes, and a
Did I
tree
say
to be
Revelations?
desired. Is that the one you're thinking?
Was it Revelations? Or is it Revelation 6:3? I get those things mixed up.
No, that's fine. It's hard to keep everything. That's why I have notes on a lot of things.
Yeah, what's
See,
crazy is
Revelation 6:3. And when he had opened the second seal, I heard the second BC say, "Come and see."
but go on, if it should talk about the horse, the
Yeah,
horseman.
just skimming a little bit. Verse 5 has a black horse. Is that 6 is
I might have
about
gotten
a
the
beast
numbers.
says.
So it's the first one that's associated with the, scholars associate it with plague, the first horse.
Sure. All right. So it's Revelation 6 then. That's this chapter.
So
On some of the stuff, I'm not completely decided on Revelations. I haven't really focused in there. I do believe that a lot of imagery that's used in Revelations is from the polar configuration. But I do believe those images are teaching us something that's going to happen.
right. I think
And so
there.
this is this isn't PaRDeS, but this would be, I would call, different angles on it, because there's
Right.
left on that.
So there's the turmoil that man goes through, and there's the natural disasters or catastrophes that happen throughout. And man isn't responsible necessarily for the catastrophes. Man is mostly responsible for what happens to man. But the concept of, so if you look at chapter 9, it talks about the legions of Apollyon or Abaddon, that bring the desire for death, there's a lot of hurt, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of panic, there's a lot of fear,
Sure.
There's a lot of wishing for death, but it's that plague is not to take man. It's the plague after that I see coming. And that one, that one is the one that my mind links to vaccines, but
Okay. Well, no, we'd have to look at in the details, but I'll keep that in mind when I study that. I want so along with the end times type of talk. So is it Daniel 9, the 70 weeks? I think that's Daniel 9, right? Let's go look. Let's go double check. I think it's, yeah, yeah, it looks like Daniel 9. Yeah. So a lot of people, and most scholars or preachers or whatever, teach that the 70 weeks is not over. I disagree with that. I do believe the 70 weeks was over.
what verse?
There's the whole chapter, but I think the main one is, a big one is verse 25, but 24 talks about the 70 weeks, but 25 is a key one for me. 26 is another one. But I believe Yeshua died in the middle of the last week, and then 3.5 later, Paul, he went and started giving it to the Gentiles. But
So
there's things.
what,
Sorry, go ahead.
so Jesus died in what week?
The middle of the last week of the 70 weeks of this Daniel's 70-week prophecy.
Okay, so about 35, and then at 38 weeks, Paul is
No, the last week. So he died at
39.
69 and a half weeks.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
I probably wasn't clear. I probably assumed you knew some of the general ideas behind the verse. Sorry about that.
So I did read it, but this has been years ago, and I need to reread.
No, that's fine. I can give you a resource, and that I like, that I haven't read it yet, but I've some of the general points that he has stated about it, I believe, because studying the Book of Mormon brought me to that belief, if that makes sense. In that I've actually talked to the author, and I've tried to ask him some question that goes along with some of the things I see the Book of Mormon saying that's related to this, and he doesn't have answers. But in general, the reason I do believe the 70 weeks have happened is because of things that the Book of Mormon says and what those verses say. In that the daily sacrifices are done. And I believe that's what part of what that prophecy in Daniel 9 says.
Are they, when you say that the daily sacrifices are done, I assume you mean like the burnt offerings and stuff that they would officially do through the Levites and stuff.
Well, yeah, I'm talking about the animal sacrifices, and that's partly correct, but not completely correct. So after Israel and the mixed multitude that was with them broke the law while Moses was up on the mountain, and Moses came down and saw that they were worshiping the golden calf.
Mm-hmm.
Moses went up and got another copy of the tablets, right? I mean, he made the second set was the exact same as the first set, but that's why I said copy, right? He was the first copier and the first one to get download on tablets, right? Anyways, just a little joke. Anyways, but in addition, because of their wickedness, and because they had already promised to keep laws that then they didn't because Moses was gone for a while, they got punishments. And some of those punishments were daily sacrifices that the Levites had to do. I believe, and we can get into the details on this if you want, and I have some pretty good Book of Mormon verses, I believe, that show this.
So,
That it's the daily sacrifices that stop. And Joseph Smith has a quote that I can give you and share a picture of, because I don't have it typed down, but
so what kind of
the
sacrifices
sacrifices are coming back, and Isaiah and Ezekiel states that sacrifices are coming back also. But which sacrifices? I believe it's the
well,
sacrifices at the
let
high
me ask
holidays.
first,
Sorry, go ahead.
what are the types of sacrifices?
There's multiple
There's like
types.
sin, and there's like burnt, and there's like peace, and there's like, but you know,
Sure.
I'm
So
not quite
in 3rd Nephi, is it 9:16? Because this is going to be a
sure.
key verse on this subject. I think it's 9:16. Let's go find out for sure.
So, just a side question. Does anybody actually watch these discussions that we have?
Some do. I can go see. Not a lot. The most I've seen on one is like 20 people. So not a ton, but some. So the last one we had, 2 people watched. Oh no, 4 people watched. The one I had before that one, 24. There's 21. So it varies. Not a lot.
Mm.
So it's not 35:9:16, the one I was thinking of. I can look it up if you're worried. If not, I'll just
Well, I'm not
go
worried.
on.
I'm just
But
curious.
the
You know,
general idea on it that I'm trying to bring out from this verse is that it's the blood sacrifices that were stopped.
okay.
And I think the blood sacrifices, and this is a part that I need to go do more research on, because I didn't grow up with Torah, right? I
Right.
grew up Christian. I was told that it doesn't apply any today. So I just ignored it like my church did. But so this is one part I haven't figured out yet that I need to do more research on, but I'm focused on other things right now. I believe there's multiple types of sacrifices. And I think the blood ones
Right.
are the ones where they sprinkled the blood on things for atonement type of purposes. Because I don't believe the sprinkling of blood was done in all of them. This is where I'm talking a little bit out of ignorance.
I know that there was the blood on the lintels and the doorway to protect.
That's Passover.
Right.
Actually, we're supposed to be doing it now. That's not supposed to be
Oh,
stopped.
we don't do that. Yeah, but
I know
the
people don't,
that
but I also know what the scriptures say.
yeah, this was one type of blood sacrifice.
Yep.
And then another type that I can remember was something about, it was some sort of celebration.
So there's Day of Atonement that just happened not too long ago, because
And
today is actually the start of Tabernacles. But
the,
anyways, Day
the
of
blood,
Atonement, they sprinkle blood on the mercy seat in the Holy of
but
Holies.
they I think it was Moses to bless.
Yeah, okay. So I know what you're talking about. After he came down from the mount and they made a covenant, they took the blood and they sprinkled it upon the people.
Right. So
Or
it
is
was
that what you're talking about? When
it was blood
Moses
of the
took the
ox.
blood and threw it on the
Right.
people.
Right. So the blood of the ox was thrown on the people as some sort of celebration. I remember it being some sort of celebration.
Yeah,
You know.
I don't know. This is
And
where I'm a little weak on, but it was part of the making the covenant.
so the blood of the lamb was to tell the angel of death to pass over and leave them alone. So it was a leave life here. So the blood of the sheep seemed to be attached to letting the people of the household live. Just let them be. Go to the next one. and the blood of the ox, at least in the context that I can remember, was some sort of celebration.
Yeah, celebrating the covenant, if I remember correctly. And this is that's one part of the Torah I don't know as well as I'd like to. I'm working on getting to know Torah better, but I'm working on it, right? Anyways, I didn't grow up with it. But the thing is, Joseph Smith has a quote that one phrase that may be somewhat popular in the more knowledgeable restorationists is that the sons will offer a sacrifice in righteousness again. I can give you the exact quote. I don't know right off the top of my head, but Ezekiel and Isaiah talks about how sacrifices are going to be happening in the millennium. I believe that it's the sacrifices that are supposed to happen during the high holidays. Like, so along, especially since today's tabernacles, here's one thing that I believe. I believe Mosiah 2 through 5 was given during tabernacles. And Torah actually, now one thing that some people will say that, well, that can't be the case because they offered sacrifices and lambs. And that's done at Passover. But they don't know that happens at tabernacles also. And I have a verse for, let me go look it up. I don't have it memorized. This is where I'm working on. But tabernacles, Leviticus 23 talks about the sacrifices for tabernacles, and so does Numbers 29, and it includes lambs.
So I looked up on Google types of sacrifice. There's the burnt offering, the purification offering, the reparation offering, the fellowship offering, and apparently significance. And that's actually a strict adherence to how you live your life.
Well, let me see if I can find the verse that I'm thinking of. Because I thought it was 35, maybe it's 35. Oh, here. Oh, I had the right chapter. I had the wrong verse. It's 35, 9:19. I thought it was 16. I had the 9 and the 6 inverted, right? No.
Okay.
Here, let me share the screen so people can see it. So this is a key verse for this, but 19, and ye shall offer up unto me no more the shedding of blood, yea, your sacrifices and your burnt offerings shall be done away, for I accept none of your sacrifices and your burnt offerings. So this gets tricky because some of that sounds like the burnt offering sacrifices, which I don't think is, this is where I need to do some more study, but I believe this verse has to do with the daily sacrifices.
You know, what's really interesting, I just want to mention this really quick.
Sure.
Where it says, I will accept none of your burnt offerings.
Sure. You know,
that's
one thing,
kind of
and this is where I need to learn more.
Well,
the ones that I do believe that will continue are the ones at the high holidays, and those aren't burnt offerings. The ones at the high holidays are meal offerings, and you eat those. And so your Google search forgot to list
what was
the
interesting.
meal ones. Huh?
What was interesting about burnt offerings is that Holocaust means burnt offering. And it was a Jewish applied name. It's a Jewish applied name to that situation.
That's interesting and insightful and disgusting at the same time, right? Here, let me share some notes since we're talking about this subject.
You have to admit,
Is that the right one? Yeah, that's the right one. Okay, so let me move. So you see my OneNote, right? Moses, where's? Oh, here we go. So this is some important verses here. But here, so performance and ordinances.
Can you enlarge that a little bit?
Oh, sure.
The
Hold on.
computer
Let
I'm
me.
currently.
Yeah, here. Hold on. 1 second. Let me stop it. Let me figure out how to share it, make it bigger, and then I'll share it again because that'll be easier.
So my computer has a delacing issue.
Oh, yeah, there we go. I found out how to do a zoom.
It starts to, instead of being aligned, it's jagged.
No, that's fine. I just
in
figured out how to
the
do Zoom,
apparent.
so I'll reshare it now.
Oh, you learned how to do Zoom for Zoom.
Oh, hey, that was funny. Is that better? I wasn't even thinking about that, but yeah. I'm zooming on Zoom.
Okay, can you scroll down to where we need to be?
Oh, all these verses.
Would you highlight it?
Okay. And there's more, but I have rough notes on this, places here and there. This is something I haven't. It's kind of. When I make a post, I'll put all my thoughts together in a nice organized fashion, but I'm not focused on making a post on this yet. So you're gonna have to kind of go with my little somewhat disorganized, random stuff all over the place for right now. So here, inasmuch as it shall be expedient, you must keep the performances and ordinances of God until the law shall be fulfilled which was given unto Moses. 2 Nephi 25:30. So there's a key part, performances and ordinances. And what the Book of Mormon says regarding performances and ordinances is important here with what I'm trying to bring out here. Because the way I view it, I see there's a difference between Torah and Law of Moses. And this is how I've made sense of the things that I've seen in the Book of Mormon and scriptures and other places, okay? And this is a big part of that. Law of Moses, I believe, is the daily performances and ordinances that were given to the Israelites after they rejected God. It was a punishment. It was the extra stuff that God told them to do as a punishment. It was not part of the law or Torah that Moses got when he went up onto the mount.
I don't know if it was so much punishment as it was.
Well,
have you?
I think there's a couple things. I think it was part punishment.
Okay, so it's not to say that
partly trying to teach them so they wouldn't miss him when he came.
Right, but what I'm trying to say is, so you're probably right. It's okay, if you can't do this, we're gonna go back to.
No, that's not what I'm saying. Because they lived Torah and Law of Moses at the same time. One wasn't taken away to give the other. They had both.
I'm not saying anything was taken away, but it's like, if they, it's like expecting a person to be able to do Shakespeare. Kid can't do Shakespeare, okay, we go back to the primers. Let's go learn your ABC. Let's make sure you can.
I see what you're saying, but that's not what happened in my opinion, because he didn't take away Torah.
Well, no, he didn't.
He gave them extra to do until his death.
Right. He basically was giving them the equivalent of muscle memory to build.
Sure. Yeah, he's giving them extra things so that way they would recognize him when he came, because in these verses from the Book of Mormon, it shows that the Law of Moses points to Christ's life. They're
And
typifying these daily sacrifices that they were supposed to do were typifying of Christ, so that way they wouldn't miss them, but they still missed them. Or
right.
sorry, not all of them, right?
It's hard to deprogram trauma, especially when you're talking generational trauma. And I think the necessity of them living in Egypt, being enslaved, being exposed to, false gods, being,
Oh yeah.
genetically, or,
I see
being
your point, but at the same
like,
time, the miracles they had to show them who God was, and he was who he said he was also a lot greater than we have today. But I know
layman
people will give.
talk to angels, and they just effed it up.
Oh yes, that's a good way of putting it. And man, they walked across the Red Sea on dry ground.
Mm-hmm.
And then they go and complain.
Mm-hmm.
Moses, you should have left us in Israel. We should have stayed slaves. But yet, when they were slaves, they were saying, I don't want to be a slave. Anyways, I know it's easy to balk on them for, going back on things, but we do it ourselves all the time, right?
Absolutely. I mean,
I'm a sinner, and sometimes it's still the same. Even though I'm striving to get rid of the same sin, I still fall back into it at times.
yeah,
right?
you're right. It's like the more things change, the more things stay the same.
Yeah.
The play is always the same, just the names change. It's like there's a billion different sayings for, yeah, they walked in our shoes and we're walking in their shoes, and somewhere, hopefully, line by line, precept by precept, hopefully we eventually break into the better programming.
Sure. Right. But I think, back to this, though, there's this. I think, like I said, there's a difference between Torah and Law of Moses. I think Torah is what Moses brought down from Mount Sinai. Torah is a loaded word too, so it means lots of things. Because
Doesn't it mean law? I mean, that's what
it
I
means instructions is a better interpretation. Christians like to translate it as law. Jews like to translate it as instructions. I'm more along the lines of instructions, but I'll say law out of habit because growing up Christian. But Paul and Jesus also said that the prophets, so like Joshua, was Torah, and that Psalms, or the writings, Proverbs, was Torah. So Torah is more than just the first 5 books of Moses, which was what a lot of people like to apply as Torah. I mean, it is Torah, but it's not the only Torah. I would say Book of Mormon is Torah, because it's instructions, right, or the law to be like him. Because Joseph Smith, and I believe this quote, if we abide by, and abide means protect, guard, defend, do, just like how we're supposed to defend, protect, and guard Torah. But Joseph Smith said, if we abide by the Book of Mormon, we'll get closer to God than any other book. I believe that. Book of Mormon's Torah to me. But anyways, so I think there's a separation between Torah and Law of Moses. I think Law of Moses is what was given them when they rejected God. It was those daily performances and ordinances. The D&C says things that I believe leads to that, and so does the Book of Mormon.
I think I got a good analogy.
Okay.
I got a good analogy. Karate Kid.
All right, which one? It's been a while since I've seen Karate Kid.
First one. Daniel wants to kick some butt.
Okay, well, that's like all of them. What are you talking about?
He's like, teach me. I want to fight. I want to fight. And Mr. Miyagi's like, wax on, wax off. wax on, wax off. And Daniel's like, what the hell? This is boring. This is repetitive. What does this do? And then after all the repetition, Mr. Miyagi helps him put it together, and he's like, oh.
Yeah, he at first he just thought, oh, you're just making me, wax
You're
your
just
fence
making
and your car. Oh no, it was painting the fence, waxing the cars, right? I think
Yeah.
uh,
Cleaning the deck and stuff. It was
yeah,
like,
yeah. But they were practicing the motions, right?
hmm
Then
hmm
later.
that's what I meant by muscle memory.
Sure, sure.
I
Yeah. And
so yeah, I think
I
karate
partly
kid.
agree because the things in the law, what I would consider the law of Moses, was pointing to Yeshua's mortal ministry and his death.
Hmm
And he did it to the T. Yeshua did it to the T. In fact, so there's a tradition in the Jews, and this is not a commandment, but I've done it the last couple of Passovers, that the night of the Passover, it was tradition for the Jews to stay up late, which kind of gives somewhat additional insight to why Jesus chewed out Peter and the three that brought with him, right? Further at the garden. Why didn't you stay up 1 hour with me? It was the Jewish tradition to stay up that night in preparation for Passover. That wasn't Passover, that's the night before Passover.
Ah,
It was their tradition to stay up then.
probably getting the unleavened bread ready and stuff.
Well, so Passover, you could, my understanding, and this is where I think some people get Passover and unleavened feast mixed together. Passover, I believe you could have leavened bread, and it was the day after. So Passover happened on the 6th day of the week,
Right.
and
So
unleavened bread started on the 7th day.
if I remember correctly, it was like, so Passover is specifically the angel of death coming through,
That's
and
one instance of it. I
and
believe Adam celebrated Passover, to be honest.
it's possible. I don't have anything to dispute you at the moment, but I think what I was trying to say, what I was going to say is Passover specifically was um, to, for the angel of death to pass over them and to kill the firstborn of Egypt. And it was in that grief, I mean, everything had been just compounding. Everybody was suffering. And it finally got to and then the accumulation where the firstborn are dead. There was just so much anguish and I just don't care anymore type of,
So,
I'm done. It was a
but they
whole,
had time to prepare to make the bread.
no, the
The time where they
Pharaoh,
didn't have prepare was the day after when they were leaving,
right.
and they still
So,
ate.
so he was like, he's like, and they were told, be ready, be, and just hightail it out as soon as you can, because after the angel's done, you got to be ready to go.
Mhm.
And Pharaoh, in his grief, said, just get the hell out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And they got the hell out. And then Pharaoh's like, wait, I just lost the whole workforce. What am I doing?
If I remember right, it was
Whatever it was.
people were kind of convinced him to go after the Israelites.
Right.
They got a
But
report that they kind of they put themselves in a bind, right? Because they went through this narrow cave, or not cave, but
passage.
passage.
It was
That's the word I'm looking for. And then they went against the Red Sea, and they couldn't go anywhere. So
right.
Pharaoh thought he could go get them.
Right.
It's like a duh, all right?
But yeah, it's just the whole point is that there is an importance to unleavened bread, but it wasn't specifically necessarily to the Passover, but it was a
Yeah, it was after. It's because they were
yeah.
hurried and didn't have time to let the bread
No
right
time to let it
before they
rise.
cooked
Right.
it because they were in the hurry.
Right.
And Last Supper, a lot of people think was on Passover. No, it was the night before. But anyways, it's somewhat related. The Last Supper was the night before Passover, not Passover.
Right. Didn't Jesus die on the day of Passover?
Yes, he did. He'd have to be the fulfillment of, or right, to be the Passover lamb, you have to die on Passover.
Gotcha.
So he'd have to die on. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. It's just, to be the Passover lamb, you have to die on Passover, and he did.
So,
In fact, he died right at the time when the high priest was doing it.
mm,
Anyways, it's just that's where he was to the letter that those
right.
sacrifices
He,
and the high holidays point to him. But anyways,
I mean, I don't know how else people get so mad at me for saying, look, you you can disagree with me if you like to, okay? I don't want to make this an argument. But I think in order for him to get that perfect timing, he had to choose when he was going to go. And
I do think there is some merit in him helping it along.
yeah, and I get in. Oh, I've gotten in so much trouble for saying that Jesus committed suicide.
Oh, Jesus committed suicide?
hmm That's
I know where you're going with that.
the definition of suicide is to end one's life, to end one's own life. And for him to release his spirit, the life essence, that for me, in a very literal way, is suicide. And the fact that he was able to, bring his spirit back and reanimate his own body, it, I mean, that's a miracle too. I mean,
He's the only one that could do it. And the only reason we can resurrect is because of him.
Well, there's been previous resurrections throughout the
But they died
scriptures,
again. Those aren't resurrections. They're being
but
raised from the dead.
literal,
Sure. They're
the literal resurrection that is the recombining of and the
yeah, but like Lazarus. I mean, there's other examples, and this actually brings in a point where it's somewhere around Alma 39 to 42, where he talks about Alma talking to his son, wicked son, Corianton. I think I said that right. Where he brings up how they've termed this the resurrection, but it really wasn't, because, yeah, I mean, they came back from the dead, but they did die again. Resurrection has the point where you don't die again.
well, I don't know. I mean,
I know what the Book of Mormon says is that when
I haven't read those arguments.
huh?
I haven't read those arguments. I don't remember reading those arguments.
No, sure. I'll just we can look at them if you want, but real quick, the Book of Mormon states that after the resurrections, our spirit and our body will never separate again. We can go look at some if you want. I'm sure I have some.
I'm sure it's there. I'm not sure what to think about that.
Oh, okay.
Because I mean, I know your stance about reincarnation. You know my stance about it.
We can go over what this
No,
Mormon
it's
says
cool.
about it.
We've actually spent, it's I think that it is, the concept of resurrection. Um, I'm not saying it's not a true concept. It feels like
It, it,
it feels truthful.
sure,
You know
sure.
what
I hear what you're saying, and it seemed
um,
like magic, for lack of a better word, right now, right?
well, sure, but I
Well,
was just thinking, you know, um, I mean, I think it's more than there's more. Oh my gosh, there's so much more. I mean, are we going to get all our bacteria and fungus too?
so there's some details that I don't know. That's one of them. I do believe that we'll have our sexual organs again. Unlike the TK smoothie. I don't know if you've heard of that, but
No.
there was an LDS prophet, I forget who it was, and it's in the TK smoothie. I'd have to go look it up. I'm going blank, but he used to teach that unless you went to the celestial kingdom, your sexual
Oh, just
organs
would
are
disappear.
flat. They're smooth. That's why they called it a TK smoothie. Oh, terrestrial kingdom smoothie. That's what it is. TK smoothie.
I mean, I have heard some, you know, some speculation on people who don't get celestially married, who don't get to the celestial kingdom, who aren't exalted, are stuck with these asexual bodies that
It's probably off of the
that
TK theory or TK
it
smoothie
probably.
theory. I forget
I
what
mean,
prophet said that, or prophet said that. Because the Book of Mormon states that our bodies are reunited in their perfect form, even, and this part I like, right? We will not lose even a hair on our head.
but that when you think about the complexity, I think I'm tired at this point. I'm like, ah. I mean, I'm starting to act like I'm drunk, but I, I'm not. I
Oh, is it
mostly
music
tired.
coming? Is he the
Anyway, um, the complexity of what is in us. I mean, it's like this may be just urban legend bullshit, but the current we only have 10% of bull. Do you remember that whole we only use 10% of our brain bullshit?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
that's still
no.
around.
The new spin, and I kind of give more credence to this than the old brain bullshit. The new understanding is only about 10% of the total DNA in our body is ours. We have so
Oh,
many
because of the
different.
junk DNA or
Well, no,
supposed
I'm
junk
not even.
DNA? I don't think science knows.
That's including the junk DNA. We have literally all sorts of flora and fauna within us. We are a biome, a very complicated biome.
Oh, yeah, yeah. But
All these
we are
different.
partly alive because of the other organisms that we are in a, oh, what's the word I want? But in a symbiotic relationship with. That's the word.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think
Just our gut,
um,
right? Has
it's
our gut ferments things because of those.
right. I mean, and that's only touching on the very simplest of understandings of all the things that they do for us and we do for them, and that interconnectedness. And
For
honestly, I
sure.
think
And I mean,
the living creatures on the planet are very much like the microorganisms within ourselves. We are to God what the bacteria is to our gut.
I see where you're going, but I do believe we are individuals. I mean,
Oh, for sure.
we're spirits. Um, but this does bring up some issues I haven't put thought into, but I do know what you're saying, that our physical bodies as they are right now is a combination of not just us, but other organisms that we're in symbiotic relationships with. How does that all work after the resurrection? I don't have a good answer. I do know that the scriptures describe our resurrected body as immortal, meaning can't die, and that it's flesh and bone compared to flesh and blood when we're mortal. What does that exactly mean? I'm not completely sure. I do
You
know
walk
that.
around with a very pale complexion.
See, this is where I don't know if that's literal or just a way to distinguish the two different. So I
No,
know LDS people think that means we don't have any blood. I think there's a
Yeah.
chance for that. I don't know if that's absolutely true or not, or it's just a way to distinguish between the two types of bodies.
I
But
guess
I also believe we're going to eat food when we're resurrected.
possibly, it's one of those things where, I mean, think about it this way. Who does the blood belong to? Very simple answer. God.
Well,
Blood
sure,
belongs.
everything belongs to God, sure.
And that is specifically, when you're talking about what physically belongs to God of us, what of us belongs to God, scripturally speaking, it's the blood. So if in the resurrection you are bone and flesh, but not flesh and blood, perhaps that could be an indication of that's when we're granted a level of sovereignty that puts us on a equal footing with the Father at
Sure,
some point.
because right now we're completely dependent upon Him and His life, and blood is symbolic of life. Where after the resurrection, I do believe it will become a time where we're not dependent upon Him. We'll always praise Him and worship Him for what He did for us, but I do believe there will become a time where we're dependent.
Hang on a sec.
Sure. So, I don't know. I would speculate that we may have microorganisms still because we're going to eat flesh and after.
Well, you got to keep them alive.
Well, I, and this is one thing that I also believe. I'm not 100% sure on this, but I came across something somewhat recently that although we'll be immortal, humans, animals won't be. And that we'll be doing the high holidays, including killing animals and eating them in heaven. And I tend to believe that. I don't know it well enough to show it from the scriptures right now, but I do believe it.
You might very well be right. I don't know. I mean, I know it might sound like kind of BS, but I think when we get enough, when we get evolved enough, we will probably be the planets and the stars that have our children on them.
I don't believe that. I know Brigham Young taught that. I don't believe it.
I don't know if he did that or not.
He taught some interesting things. And so
I know that he taught that we will make worlds.
Sure.
It makes sense to me because when it talks about the breath of God being our breath.
Sure. The Genesis talks about God putting his breath into Adam's nostrils, right?
Right.
One thing that English translations don't do justice is how breath and wind is also spirit. And so I
Right.
see this as a play on words where God is giving his way of living and being to us, into man. And
I
Moroni
mean,
7 kind of says that in itself, because it says, I don't know the exact quote, but Moroni 7 says, in essence, God has given the Holy Ghost to all men.
I can see that. I can see some people having that understanding. We have this, generally speaking, most Christians have a schism. It's like a split. Here's the physical side, here's the spiritual side, and the two are not the same.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sure.
That's how we have learned to think about our world. There is physical over here, spiritual over here. That's it. There is no, but honestly, for me, it's actually like saying that there's a mind-body split. Is
So
there?
here's something that goes with it that I have handy. D&C 2934. Wherefore, verily I say unto you, that all things unto me are spiritual, and not at any time have I given unto you a law which was temporal, neither any man nor children of men, neither Adam, your father, whom I created.
Now, what was that from?
D&C 2934 and 35 goes along with it also. So just the next
Okay.
verse. Behold, I give unto him that he should be an agent unto himself, and I gave unto him commandment, but no temporal commandment gave I unto him, for my commandments are spiritual. They are not temporal, nor spiritual, nor carnal, nor sensual. And the Book of Mormon says something like that also.
Or, Pearl of Great Price talks about how everything is,
Well, it talks about how the world was created spiritually and then physically after. If that's
and there was, and it's like, there's really, and then I guess, I know, we're not a big Doctrine and Covenants, not Doctrine and Covenants, that, oh geez, I just mentioned it, what was it, Lectures of,
Lectures on Faith.
no, the, uh, Doctrine something, the collection of conference talks.
Oh, Journal of Discourses.
Yeah, thank you. Journal of Discourses. So, in Journal of Discourses, I know you're not a big fan of it, but sometimes they actually stumble upon some interesting things.
Oh, I would say there's probably some truth in there, but
So
in my
one of
honest
the
opinion, there's more falsehoods in there, and it's not effective to find truth going through it.
so one of the things that's in there that has really affected my worldview is the concept that spirit is actually, quote, finer matter. That there is actually no difference
Sure,
between
I believe
spirit
Joseph Smith
and matter.
that, and this is one I don't focus on because I don't know if it's just LDS false traditions that he said that, or if he actually did say that. But I tend to think there's an authentic quote from Joseph Smith where he said that spirit is just more finer matter.
Right. So because there is really no difference, just like there is no actual difference between mind and body. For me, spiritual outcomes are going to be the literal physical outcomes.
Sure. To some degree, I agree with that. I don't know if I would say 100%, but I do see that some. For example, in the New Testament, Christ healed a blind man that was born blind. And people ask, so who sinned? Him or his parents? And Christ said, none. He was like this so that way the power of God could be manifest.
Yeah.
So there is a place for what you're saying, but I'm just saying, because I do think it does happen, but we shouldn't take it too far. Because there's an example from the New Testament that if you take that completely literally and it's 100% this, it goes against it, if that makes sense.
Well, there is a danger to taking things literal
Or
because
too far. Because I think there's a balancing effect, because not everything in our life is because of things that we've done, right?
right.
Even the Book of Mormon talks about how we feel the effects of other people's sins. So we're in a world where we affect each other. How much we like it, if that's good or bad, that probably depends on the person, right?
Yeah.
But
I mean, it's one of those things where, the thing about taking things literally is you have to be careful in being fixed in your interpretation, because your interpretation may in fact be wrong, and that's what makes being literal so dangerous.
sure, right. In fact, there's a Karaite Jew I like, Nahum Gordon, but he has a talk that goes along with this that I don't remember the name of it. I could look it up if you want, but he brings out how all scripture readings are interpretation. Even the commandment, thou shalt not murder, is an interpretation. Because the way it is in Hebrew, depending how you want to read it, it could be a question and not a statement. I believe it's a statement, and pretty much everybody believes it's a statement, but that is an interpretation of it. For example, Hebrew didn't have punctuations to make it clear if it was a question or a statement.
Right.
You just changed the inflection, and now it's a question. Anyways,
And
everything's interpretation, but some
right.
people are better at taking context into account to get their interpretations, right?
There's another thing is like, not, I mean, the whole, with your example, thou shalt not kill, does it break that commandment if you defended yourself
No,
from being
because
murdered?
thou shalt not kill is a bad translation. It's
I know, but
thou shalt not murder.
it's because willingly taking a life,
Well, so this
can
gets
be,
into what murder actually means, because murder is pre-planning it, thinking about it, wanting to do it. Where killing is that you just had like
an act
self-defense,
of passion,
huh?
a crime of killing is a crime of passion.
Sure. There's that. I don't know if I wouldn't put self-defense in that, but there are killing of passions, and that's a different category, even in today's civil law in the United States and in Torah, from my understanding. There's but murder, where you pre-plan it, figure out how to do it and all that stuff, right? Or is a completely different ball game, and that you should not do, in which I
Right.
include war.
Well, I mean, to be the devil's advocate here, if one does not dedicate themselves to defending their life, to the last type of thing, chances are they won't succeed in actually defending themselves. You have to be pre-committed to the possibility of
Oh, sure, sure. So I guess in a sense you might be saying it's pre-planned, right? Because
Right.
uh, I see where
I
you're
mean,
going.
I'm
I
not
think
saying,
that's looking beyond the
well,
mark personally, but I see what you're saying. Because you're not going out looking to go kill someone specifically. You're just wanting
right,
to defend what your rights are, which includes
right,
living. Um,
right.
and on the war part, I mean, the Book of Mormon, and I can bring out verses, but I think the Book of Mormon makes it pretty clear that we should not go start wars, and we should only defend ourselves on our own land. And along with that, in this, you're frozen. I don't know if you can hear me. Hello? I'm gonna pause for a
Taking
minute.
care of your own.
Oh, you froze for a little bit, but like Captain Moroni, um, made it either you defend your country or you're gonna get killed. And that's a troubling thing for some people. But from my studies, that's what actually Torah teaches, that you're supposed to take care of others. In fact, love your neighbor, right? I mean, it could even be just in that. But I don't know the details, all the details right off the top of my head, but I can give you some articles if you want. But Torah actually teaches that you need to defend your neighbors and your country.
Right.
But defend, and defense is completely different being the aggressor. You
And be right.
not be the
I mean,
aggressor.
it's not a lack of aggression, but it's the lack of initiating
Correct.
the
In fact,
um
even Captain Moroni, even when he had the Lamanites captured, right? He still gave them a chance, right? Repent,
right,
don't do it anymore, and then I'll let you go because I don't want to kill you. But they didn't want to do that. The Lamanites, they were like, I'm going to kill you.
right. I remember the ones that were surrendered were sent to um what areas to they were basically they had to take an oath of conversion, and then they were expected to um provide by working the land to provide for the armies and stuff.
Yeah,
It was an
or
interesting
build
setup.
up the defenses and stuff like that. Yeah.
Anyway, I'm gonna have to head out soon.
Okay.
So let's plan on closing down by midnight my time. It's 11:46 now here.
Okay. So, do you want sacrament then?
Yeah.
Okay. So the blood represents life, and we're supposed to remember his life while partaking of the sacrament. Also, wine is bitter. And so in Mosiah 18, it, it talks about the covenant we make before we're baptized is to keep all his commandments. But it puts an emphasis on how we should mourn with those that mourn and comfort those in need of comfort. Helping other people can be bitter, just like Christ's atonement he did to help us was bitter.
Right.
And so I
I
think it
mean,
helps us remember that also.
the
Also, the
his mother.
sacrament, part of it is receiving the Holy Spirit, right? Wine, as you drink it, has a burning feeling in your bosom. And even the LDS Church says this, but I don't think they completely understand it. They relate the Holy Spirit to a burning in their bosom.
Right. Whoa!
Did it burn?
It burns. Oh man, it burns. But yeah, um, I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if it's more than that, though. I mean,
I
so
probably is. This is still
I
a
mean,
mystery I still
there's so many.
try to think about and try to figure out.
Right. I mean, there's so many levels to it. I mean, everything you say, I think is right, and anything that I might say might be right, but whatever we say is not necessarily the end all be all, nor is it just between the two of us the end all be all, because it's. I once heard somebody say, God is all things to all people, or that is, God is, probably a better way of saying it is, God is who his people need him to be.
Okay, depending on what you think they need him to be, I would agree, because yes, God is what we need him to be, but what is it really that we need him to be? Because on the one point that, God is everything to everybody, God is all good. God is not evil. And so I would take an exception to that. But I do believe that God is what we need him to be. And he was our perfect example of who to be. And he, out of everything he could do, his whole life and purpose is to bring the immortality and eternal life to us. And he came to be mortal so that someone would have the perfect life, that when he died, it would break the bands of death. Because, and the reason I say that is the punishment for sin is death. Christ never sinned, didn't deserve death, and that's why the bounds of death could be broken.
Well, this brings up another question for me.
Okay.
If God is what we can be, and we are what God was, I'm not quite sure if, I mean, a lot of people explain it as he's a separate entity.
So that little statement that is common in the LDS Church and in some other places, I don't completely agree with, and I can get into reasons why I don't completely agree with it if you want to, or you can continue on with your question.
Well, so in the Book of Mormon, does not agree with the concept of God that they teach in modern Mormonism.
Amen to that.
So God the Father is spirit, and God the Son is flesh manifest.
Sure, we can go look at Mosiah 15, because the Father became the Son.
Right.
And
So
in verses, Jesus is our Father. Jesus,
So
here's something that goes along with what we just did. The Book of Mormon clearly teaches that the eternal Father is Jesus. In the sacrament prayers, who are we praying to? The eternal Father. That's Jesus. We're
right.
supposed
I
to
mean
pray to the
that.
Father. We did. Jesus is the Father.
So while I don't necessarily have issues with that, to accept that concept. Oh, did I just exit something?
So
Hang on. Let me.
one thing you
There we
need to remember that in Hebrew, Father means leader, Son means follower. Jesus was the perfect follower of what he himself taught.
I have a hard time with the exception of resurrection without the concept of reincarnation and the concept of the Father, the Son, as presented in the Book of Mormon. I'm probably not making sense.
That didn't make sense. So you may need to
So-
rephrase it.
Jesus, so as exalted, resurrected beings, are we supposed to be like God?
Yes and no, and I can give you why I say yes and no. I mean, different people will probably give you different answers,
Right.
but I can tell you why I believe yes and no if you want.
But I guess the question is, did God the Father have at any point in time a body like us?
So, who I believe God is Jesus. So yes. Now, here's maybe more what you're asking. I also believe that Jesus had a father, leader himself. And yes, Jesus's leader had a body like us. No, I said it that way in a specific way, reason, because there's other things in the LDS Church that people say with this that I don't mean that. For example, the Book of Mormon and Joseph teaches that our spirits are eternal, meaning they were never born of a father and a heavenly mother.
Can you hold that thought for just one second? Can you hurry with the water? I'll be able to hear you now.
Okay, so what I was saying is that the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith taught that our spirits are eternal, meaning no beginning, no end. And if our spirits didn't have a beginning, that means they could not have been, this is not, you'll know what I mean, but spiritually born of Heavenly Father and a Heavenly Mother. Because if that happened, that means our spirits had a beginning. But the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith teaches that our spirits are eternal.
I thought it was, so in Pearl of Great Price, it talks about how intelligence is eternal and unchanging, and spirit itself, which is made out of intelligence, is changeable.
So I don't recall that in the Pearl Great Price, but I'm not an expert in that area. Do you happen, I would imagine that's probably in Abraham. Do you remember where in Abraham that is? We can go look at it.
Yeah, let me go bring that up. Let me see if I can bring that up.
There's one in Abraham 3 that relates to the subject, but as far as I know, it doesn't say what you just said. But at least not the verses that I'm familiar with in that area.
Okay, prize. Oh, there it is. Okay, I think it might be in Abraham. Well, it might be in Moses.
Okay.
Let me just see.
Well,
I'm just
the topical guide or the index to the triple, right? On the word intelligence. Let's see if you can find what you're thinking of.
Oh, here we go. I think this might be it. Just let me look through here to see if I can find it.
Are you looking at a physical or a digital?
I'm digital.
Okay, because you can do a find if it's digital for intelligence.
I did see that thing that I did see that thing that you did with the whole search thing.
Oh, my search program? Well, so my search program is separate from what I'm talking about. That program lets you do more advanced searches. But I'm just saying here on, I don't know if you're looking at the computer or, I'm guessing computer, but on the computer you can go Control F and then type in the word.
Oh, I'm actually on my phone looking for it.
Oh,
I don't know.
sometimes there's a magnifying glass icon you can
There,
use at the top.
I'll do that.
Oh, and my program only runs on desktop.
Technical guide.
And it's not, I know it's not the most user-friendly one, but it gets the job done.
Oh, hmm. Okay, let me see if I can go here. No. Tia! Your phone. Where is it? It's on the counter by the water. No, it was not this one.
I know there's one in the DNC somewhere about intelligences, but I don't know where it is off the top of my head. I don't know if that might be the one you're thinking of.
Okay, section 93. Section 93, verse 29 is what it's taking me to. Man was also in the beginning with God. Intelligence, or the light of truth, was not created or made, neither indeed can be. All truth is independent in that sphere in which God has placed it, to act for itself as all intelligence also, otherwise there is no existence. I'm going to have to look for where it talked about intelligence being immutable and the beginning of all things.
So I know the LDS Church teaches that, I mean, God birthed intelligences into spirits, kind of like humans today birth spirits into physical bodies. I don't believe that anymore, and I do know they use this verse to somewhat support that. I don't see it.
So I'm wondering if it might be something along these lines. You know how we're supposed to be organisms, right? What is an organism? An organism is something that self-organizes.
Sure.
So one of the really interesting things about ThunderBolts projects that they've been doing is that when they run electricity, oftentimes the plasma will form itself into simple cells.
Sure.
And
It organizes itself. It also does plasma pinches. It also does a lot of the things that matches what archaeologists find a lot of Native American, Native Indians anywhere in the world. So yeah.
but the concept of a form of abiogenesis makes absolute sense to me, because it's not like it's coming out of nothing, but literally the energetic, when it's energetic, it simply organizes itself, like the matrix. It forms like, well, you've seen Star Trek. I mean, imagine a holodeck, right?
Sure.
That just, when energized properly or directed, it can organize itself into life, and that's, for me, that's the physics of the universe. Is, we're kind of like these holograms,
Sure. Along with that line, how does matter even stick together? When you really go down to the layer of atoms, it's electric. they're attracted to each other.
Yeah, exactly. Electricity or the electricalness of it. I mean, it has like this innate intelligence that reacts to observation and other, intelligence, and it's, I mean, after
So
seeing that,
maybe I'm wrong here, but I think I'm hearing you applying it to the matter that, like the atoms that our spirit are somehow inhabiting, right? I don't know how that works, but
yeah,
I do believe my spirit is in my physical body.
it's a, it's just an organization on a more complicated level, and it's like we, we'll hit there's so much to learn at this level, and before there was, I mean, that whole line upon line, precept upon precept is also another thing that I take pretty literal, but there's so many interpretations of that, you know what I mean? And I'm sure I haven't even thought of some of them.
Well, I have a post on something.
For leaving at 12, I'm not doing a good job.
No, that's fine. I'll give you the link. You can look at it later. It's not something to read right now, right? Oh, my computer is acting funny. But I'll give you the link later. But I have not put thought into what to make out of how's weird, intelligences, because I know what the LDS Church teaches about it, which I don't currently believe, and it hasn't been a high priority for me to go try to figure it out. Because yeah, I know that like the 9030, we just read it, but what is that actually saying? I don't know. I mean, one thought we could do real quick if you want is to go look up intelligence in the 1828 dictionary to see if it gives some insights.
Sure.
Okay, hold on. Let me find that. I don't want to misspell the word. I'm going to try to find and copy it.
Actually, I have I found an app that's the Webster 1928. No, 1828.
1828.
Yeah.
Sure. I have the physical book, or a replica, actually.
I'm
Um,
jealous.
but it's in the States. It's not here in Argentina, I think.
So intelligence, noun, Latin intelligentsia, from intelligio, to understand. This verb is probably composed of in, inner, or intus, within, the lego, or collect. The primary sense of understand is generally to take or hold, as we say, to take one's ideas or meanings.
So one's understanding or skill to notice information communicated, an account of things distant or before intelligence may be transmitted, commerce.
Of acquaintance. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's okay. Commerce of acquaintance. That's not English we're familiar with, that's for sure. Terms of intercourse. Now, I know intercourse did not always
It meant
mean
speaking
sex.
together.
I mean, that's how we use it
Yeah,
today, but that's not
I
how it
know.
was anciently.
Well, being a teenager in the 80s and 90s, reading The Wizard of Oz was one dirty joke after another. He ejected wildly. my God.
Boy, well, yeah.
I mean, I knew what it meant,
I
but
don't think I read laws. I mean, I've seen the various. I think there's only one edition of it that I've seen, but I've seen it. I hadn't read it, but anyways.
I read the unabridged edition, and the vernacular had me making.
So I wonder if the double ententes were there when it was actually written, which I don't know when it was actually
You
written.
know, it's possible. I mean, the concept of, um, I mean, an ejection is an ejection, regardless of whether it's, semen or
Or a rocket.
words or
Or,
a tape. When you push when you
for
eject the
sure. The
VHS
bullet.
or whatever,
Yeah.
I mean, it means what it means, and it certainly can mean. It probably did mean all those all at
Well,
once.
I don't know because I think the culture has gone a lot more sexual than it used to be. Um,
Well, yeah,
so
it's true that they don't. You're not likely to read. He ejaculated excitedly, and
oh,
meaning that he simply was trying to share an idea, you know.
or how we're having intercourse right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, geez. Yeah.
Sorry. I mean, that's not how you use the word today, right? Especially without the additional context. It's just,
Oh,
anyways.
that once you hit puberty and you're capable of thinking about innuendos, it just never. I mean, you can control it, but it never really ends.
So my son's almost 5, and I don't want to go too much on this, but he's at the age where they like to think about pee and poop.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of annoying. But I just flow with it because I know it's normal, right? I don't make
Yeah.
a big deal out of it. But anyways,
He'll
let's
be
go back
back.
to the definitions.
Sure.
So acquaintance, intercourse as in talking, intelligence between men is harmony. Well, that's interesting. That would make some sense because, anyways. So we say there is good understanding between persons when they have the same views or free from discord. Well, that just kind of cleared up what I was thinking. 4. Oh, this was interesting. A spiritual being. You know, I haven't focused on this word because I haven't worried about it. But look, it's actually somewhat saying what my first inclination is: spirit. A spiritual being, as created intelligence, is belief that the universe is peopled with innumerable superior intelligences. So this kind of goes along with what I would tend to believe. It's just another word for spirit.
Right.
In fact, I think Abraham 3 interchanges spirit and soul. That's one that I was, when we were first kind of talking about this subject. We can go look at it real quick if you want, but
No, I think I need to like start winding it down. I
no, that's fine. I'm glad we looked up the word though, because I like the number definition 4 kind of,
hits it for you.
yeah, I mean, I still would want to study it more, which it'll be a while before I focus on that because I have other things I want to focus on, but it, to me, it gives me justification for not believing what the LDS Church teaches on it and how I'm more inclined to believe it. Because right there, a spiritual being. Anyways, I think this is why it's helpful to look up the words when
Oh,
Joseph
for
Smith
sure.
translated or got the revelations, because there's a lot of meanings that have been forgotten.
Yeah.
And people use that to twist what they mean.
Oh my goodness, semantics. It's not just a game, it's a lifestyle.
Oh yeah, like how the LDS Church incorrectly interprets interest with regard to tithing. Because interest in
Oh,
Joseph Smith Day
yeah.
was a legal term for surplus.
Oh, I haven't even told you what I think of the. Have you heard of conversion therapy?
Yes, for the
Well,
for the
you
gays.
know, here's the crazy thing, okay? I think people nowadays who tell somebody who has body dysmorphia that they should change their gender has committed conversion therapy. They're basically telling them that the
Sure,
best way
I
to
can see
treat
that.
their
I hadn't made that connection, but yeah, and I've come across how some parents are doing it to children like at young as 4, 5, or even younger, and I think
younger. And
that's
you know what's really scary is that people actually think they've changed the idea of conversion therapy to fit trans people, but now it's not the people who are actually guilty of doing it who are doing it. It's the people who try to prevent
oh,
transition
society is so screwed up.
are doing the conversion therapy.
They're in psychology books. It used to be if you wanted to change your gender, you had a disorder. Now today they push it and encourage it.
Mm-hmm.
It
Of course,
Today's society is so messed up. In fact, the guys that become women, right? They keep their part.
basis, their genitalia.
Yeah, they're man and woman. You know what that imitates? The Baphomet. The
Oh
Baphomet
yes,
is
yeah,
woman. It has the breast and then has the penis.
yeah, and you know the thing is, a lot of that confusion and stuff is brought on from sexual trauma.
Yes, I
There's a
agree with
lot
that.
of trans men who who got, sometimes they're confused, sometimes they're peer pressured, and sometimes it's because they were sexually assaulted
Sure,
and they just can't.
it's a case by case
Right.
um, situation, and sometimes there's mixtures of all of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, in fact, I don't focus on this, but I do believe the scriptures teach against that. They even teach against, I don't know, it was you or somebody else was talking about this recently, but how scriptures actually teach that a man should not try to look like a woman and a woman should not try to look like a man. But
Well, I know that there is definitely a condemnation for a man to lay with a man as if he were a woman.
correct, which is gay sex.
And
And I think the
I'm not
opposite applies
sure.
for women too, but it's not explicitly stated.
Well, I mean, this is where getting into, I'm not saying that it is or it isn't, I don't know. That's my honest answer.
Okay.
But there is also a legal argument, you could say, that if it isn't explicitly forbidden, it's not necessarily condemned.
I would disagree with that, and I think just the history within Torah shows that because the Israelites were given God's law, right? And then they broke it, and then God gave more to help clarify what that law actually meant.
Right.
So
So,
I think that just proves the thought or theory that you just did, because
well, I mean, it is very specific. Women, it does very specifically say women aren't to lay with beasts. Women aren't to lay with their relatives. No incest, no bestiality, no necrophilia.
yeah, sure, sure.
And
But I
it's
don't. But I think you're correct that it does not explicitly say woman with woman. But
Yeah. So I mean, they're very. It does. It has. It is not shy at all about saying. You don't do this. 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 You don't do
sure,
this. You
sure.
don't do this.
But maybe there was
And
now this is, who knows what's going on, but maybe there wasn't such a big problem with it back then as it is now. But I don't know. It's a lot of speculation. I tend to believe not laying with your same sex applies for both sexes, but
Right.
I
A
do
lot
know
of,
it's not explicitly stated for women.
right. It's just one of those things where, um, sometimes it's just simpler just to say, look, you don't do same-sex attraction. Just make it simple, okay?
Well, some of those, I think it was, we're divorced from the culture. And some of the things that are in Torah are things that were specifically happening in the culture that they were in. And God did make it simple. Don't do that because it was happening.
Right. And
Or
another
we
thing.
look at it and think it's silly. But those things are happening today.
Oh, for sure. Oh my goodness.
I mean, they're not out in public where everybody sees it nowadays, like maybe it was back then, but those things do happen.
No, it's unfortunately very getting out in the open. I mean,
Oh, well,
I don't
I
know if
haven't
you've ever
seen
heard
it,
of
but
maps. Maps.
I don't know what that is, but I probably just.
It's uh, I forgot exactly what it was, but it's supposed to be like uh, age where it's okay to be pedophiles, basically.
Oh, yeah. Well, California's making pedophile more legal, and the
Yeah.
LGBTQ plus whatever letters there is to it now is trying to make pedophilia okay. I mean, depending how far you want to take it, the LDS Church tries to say it's okay to some degree because they say Joseph Smith practiced pedophilia, right? With
Well,
marrying a
there's a difference.
14 or 16, which I
There's
don't believe he did, but that's what the LDS Church teaches.
so the term pedophilia specifically refers to somebody who is a prepubescent stage. I forgot what the term was for pubescent, postpubescent.
Okay, so 16, maybe, I see what you're saying.
So
So I might not
16
be using the
is
term completely technically correct.
right. So if it's usually it's like under 12 and under is considered prepubescent. That's absolutely pedophilia. 13 and up is the term that I forgot is like pedis something, but it deals with pubescent, post-pubescent, adolescents, not children.
Okay, well, either way, I think both categories are wrong.
Yeah, it is pretty disgusting.
Um, and the and society is trying to make it okay, and California actually made a law that it is okay recently.
Well, let's see. They instead of saying we don't want you messing with little girls, they're like, well, since we made it to the judge's discretion to mess with little girls, let's go ahead and throw the boys in because, well, we got to be equal.
I guess I don't know the exact details of what they did because I
So
haven't looked into it.
they, there are certain penalties, and so there's a sex registry. I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of a sex offender registry.
Sure. I don't know if it's just statewide or nationwide, but I'm aware.
It's run state by state, but it's a national thing where you can search other states' lists, and when you get put on the list, it can interfere with jobs. It can prevent you from getting homes.
Sure.
Um, Oh,
Okay, well, maybe it's not the list that does, but the punishments that go along with how you got onto the list that does it. But the list is there so others can be
figure out whether
informed
you
of
want to be
those who
there
are
or
around
not.
them to protect their children.
Right. But so, I mean, it's a generally reasonable concept, but then there's always the devil in the details. Um, I'm not for sex registries, mainly because my cousin ended up on one. So he made a few mistakes when he was still a teen and should have just been in juvenile. You know, all this
Or
stuff that
they treat
happened
him
should
as
have
an
been.
adult, because I think
They treated him
it's an
as an
adult.
adult, despite the fact that what he did wrong was when he was a juvenile. And because they decided to treat it as he was an adult, they ended up putting him on the sex registry list. And that
Without knowing the
really,
details, I
it
guess
made his life
I think in
very
general,
difficult.
there's
Um,
exception. There should be rightfully exceptions for non-adults and adults on some of these things.
right. And, you know, I mean, it really does, it's very muddled in do you treat um, do you treat a young woman like she's an adult or not? I mean, a a young woman, a teenage girl, can go and get an abortion without her parents knowing, but
Which I don't agree with, but anyways.
she can't. She's not allowed to say, in general terms, she's not allowed to say, to consent to the act that got her that way in the first place.
And that makes no sense to me, but
And
I think there's a lot of inconsistency in civil law for sure.
right. And, you know, I mean, there doesn't, and, you know, that's what California was trying to do is that, so they do have a limitation on age where up to the age of 14, as long as there's within a 10-year difference, the judge has the discretion to put somebody on the sex registry or not. What if it's below 14, or if there is a wider gap than 10 years, then the judge doesn't have the discretion.
Oh,
They
it's
go on the
have
sex
to.
registry.
It's period. You do it. No questions asked.
But the thing is that they have that whole 14 and 10 years difference for girls and vaginal sex, but it was handled much differently, much more tight. You know, it's like if a 14-year-old boy decided to have a sexual relationship with a man, um, that the older partner would be put on the sexual registry list, whether or not that 14-year-old boy consented to the act. That was
Okay, because there
before,
wasn't the 10-year leeway like there was with
right?
girls. So
But
they added the 10-year leeway to the men.
right. So I'm not sure. You know, I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, it's on the one hand, it's good that they're more consistent, but on the other hand, shouldn't have gone the
Well, they
other way.
probably should have been more consistent in another way than the way that they
Yeah,
did it. Because to
it's like
me,
maybe
they went consistent in being more liberal rather than protecting more. They
right.
actually protected less. But I do see the point of being consistent, but I think they went to be consistent in the wrong direction.
Yeah, you can only have an open mind so much before your brains spill out, right?
I don't know. You would think so, but some of those liberals like Hillary and others, I don't know. I've heard things that the people that are like that, they are really not happy, and they do a lot of these bad things just to forget all their
The
woes.
bad things that probably happened to them, a lot of them, you know, a lot of this stuff is cyclical.
Sure.
You get
A
the
lot of
wires.
it's family based, even, which is
Yeah, you
seems
get the
even
wires
sicker.
crossed when you're young, and there's just no uncrossing them, or
A lot
very
of it's
little.
family based. So, have you read Exoneration of Emma, Joseph, and Hyrum?
Mm-mm.
It's a good book. Um, I'll, I'll give you the link to it later. But the author's granddaughter's grandpa, so his father-in-law was a high LDS official, 70 or higher. I don't remember all the details, but
Okay.
uh, the grandpa was doing things he shouldn't have been doing.
Yeah,
And
there's a lot of stories about the sexual abuses um, done by the authority and how they hide it.
yeah,
And
which is sad because actually the Doctrine and Covenants, God says they should be excommunicated, but that's not, just period. But that's not what the LDS Church is doing.
right.
They're hiding the sin rather than getting rid of the sin out of the church, and it's getting bigger. Anyways, um, and that book, Exoneration of Emma, Joseph, and Hyrum, is from the research of a lot of things he did trying to make sense of what happened and how it was started with Brigham Young and not Joseph Smith. And I think he did a very good job. In fact, it's my favorite book on the subject.
Okay.
If you want
This
to read on that subject, Polygamy
actually,
or
is
How
there an
Joseph Smith didn't
audiobook?
practice it, it's the book I recommend.
Is there an audiobook of it?
No, there's a Kindle. It's not an audio.
Well, I guess so. Uh, not all of them, but there are some Kindle books that are audio um, enabled that allow for text to read or text to
Well,
speak.
if you get the Kindle and if it's not enabled, I'm friends with the author. I'll talk to him and he'll probably enable it because I'm sure it's probably a simple switch.
That would be awesome. Maybe you should, if you know him, and talk to him and see if maybe because it's not just me who really just needs the
Oh,
audiobook to
I,
be able to read it.
I, my favorite thing about Audible is that I can read a book while doing other things, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's I may not always get the preferred book I may want because I still read books because, well, for one, I read the Book of Mormon, right?
Right.
And then there's other books like I have one on Daniel that I'm gonna read soon that I
Hmm.
got on Kindle. Not everything I want is in Audible, and then also sometimes it's just reading is different than listening to it too. And this Daniel book it's more technical. I want to read it more, right?
Yeah, it
Anyway,
is true that you don't want to. Oh my gosh, that was. I mean, that was the only way I really could have read it. It still took me months. I mean, it literally took me months
for
to
what?
wade through it. There was a book that I read. It was called The Environmental Causes of Autism, and it was slogged.
The title sounds boring.
It was just so loaded, top heavy, bottom heavy, side heavy, with all these studies and quotes from studies and terminology. And I mean, I was learning I could practically do brain surgery when I was done. I learned so much. And I missed about 2/3 of the book because it was like slogging, you know.
Well, actually, I like stuff like that in areas where I want it, right? I don't want that in everything, but the areas that I really care about, I like stuff like that. But
Right.
that's not in every subject. Like the book I listened to, Pagan Christianity, recently,
Mm-hmm.
I actually wish they would have got more into the details.
Mm.
But they did a pretty good job at doing a basic overview to get where most people would probably want to get into. But me, that's a subject I care more about. I wanted all the details, but they didn't get into it.
Sounds like something I'd be interested in. Is it the explanation of paganism for Christianity, or is it an
But it
explanation
shows how
of?
Christianity became pagan,
Oh,
how they
okay.
started adopting the pagan practices.
Gotcha.
Even what they do in church on Sunday with the preacher up front just preaching instead of
Uh-huh.
that's not supported by scriptures, and he gets in the details. In fact, Moroni, part of the reason why this is open forum is
Mhm.
because I believe the Book of Mormon, Moroni 6, says by the Spirit. It doesn't say pre-planned. It's by the Spirit, and that's why it's all of these that I do are completely open forum.
Free
People
range.
want to talk about.
It's like you got your spaghetti plate. Let's see sticks.
You broke up a little bit, so you have to say that again.
I'm saying, you got your spaghetti plate. You got your buffet of whatever, and you just kind of toss it at the wall and see what sticks.
Sure, sure. Well, one thing, I mean, this book talks about a lot, but it says in the first century, that is what they did, is what Moroni 6 said. I, I'll be honest. I mean, I didn't
Well,
take good enough notes to make a post on this and show
mhm.
point by point, but a lot of things that he brings out in there, I don't agree with everything he says, but a lot of things, the answers are in the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
Of course,
Well,
I
I
mean, I
mean,
might
it
be
does
biased
talk
because I
about.
believe it's the Book of Mormon, but anyways.
I mean, the where it talks about getting together for communion, for doing the church thing in New Testament, it talks about you're supposed to get together and edify each other. I mean, that basically means you teach each other from your understanding, I guess, or
Well,
something.
here, real quick, let's
Yeah.
go read it in Moroni 6, what it says, real quick. Um, just want I'll say, so this is Moroni 6, verse 9. I mean, we can read the whole chapter, but the one point that really applies to what I'm saying is 9. And their meetings were conducted by the church after the manner of the workings of the Spirit
Okay.
and by the power of the Holy Ghost. For as the power of the Holy Ghost led them to whether to preach, or to exhort, or to pray, or to supplicate, or to sing, or even so it was done. So pretty much this,
Whatever you're inspired to do, you do.
yeah, pretty much. So this, how the LDS Church brags about how they're having the same lesson around the whole world at the exact same time, completely contradicts the Book of Mormon.
Yeah. Hmm.
I'll be honest, and I've probably told you this before, pick something, what the LDS Church does and teaches, the Book of Mormon says otherwise. I mean, this is the fact that I know people in the church that brag and how it must be the true church because we're teaching the same thing, the same lesson around the whole world. And I read Moroni 6:9. I see something completely different. And one of the things that the pagan Christianity gets into is that historically it was differently, and it was in line with Moroni 6:9.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Well, it's It can get a little scary trying to do free range, unstructured.
Sure. I'll tell you, since I've left the church, some things have been harder for sure. And especially at the beginning, I was tempted to go back, but I know the problems. I can't close my eyes to it. But over time, I've gotten used to it. It's scary at first.
Yeah.
It's scary to rely on your own relationship with God rather than having some man telling you how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
But we're supposed to have a relationship with God, not with some other man.
True.
And so this is actually I believe how it should be, even though that's not what people are used to.
We'll get used to it. Anyway, I think this is a good point to let
And
to start at this point. So
Sure.
thank you very much. It was good talking with you, and
It's been
thank
a
you
pleasure.
for the sacrament. It was definitely much needed. And you have a good evening.
Sure. Well, I may go to bed in a little bit, but
Yeah, you
I
probably
need a
should.
drink. My mouth is dry.
I've been doing it. We have talked quite a bit, and I've made sure I had some liquid, but yeah, go get some water or
The only
something.
liquid I've had for a little while was wine, and that is not the right
That
liquid
dries
for
you out too. So
surgery.
yeah, water. Go get some
Yeah,
water.
I'm gonna go make a tea.
That sounds good. All right. I'll talk to you later.
All right, take care.
Bye.